The autumn of 1887 arrived quietly in the small English village of Ashcombe, where narrow stone streets wound between rows of cottages with thatched roofs, and the morning air carried the scent of damp earth, burning firewood, and the distant sea. It was a peaceful place, where nearly everyone knew one another, where church bells marked the passing hours, and where life moved with comforting predictability. Among the villagers lived a man named Thomas Whitmore. Thomas was 36 years old, broad-shouldered, quiet by nature, and known throughout the county as one of the finest carpenters anyone had ever hired. His hands were rough from years of shaping oak, walnut, and pine into furniture that often lasted longer than the people who purchased it. He was not wealthy. He owned no grand estate. He had never traveled farther than London. Yet almost everyone agreed on one thing: Thomas Whitmore was a good man. Each morning before sunrise, he lit a small lantern inside his workshop and worked until evening with remarkable patience. He never rushed his craft. Every table, every chair, every cabinet, every wooden cradle. He believed that if something was worth building, it was worth building well. People trusted him because he never cheated anyone. He charged fair prices, finished every job on time, and if a poor widow could not afford to pay, Thomas often repaired her furniture without asking for a single penny. His kindness became almost as famous as his workmanship. But if there was one person he loved even more than his work, it was his wife. Her name was Eleanor. Thomas had first met Eleanor nearly 12 years earlier during the village harvest festival. She had been standing beside a small flower stall, laughing as children chased one another through the market square. Thomas later admitted to a friend that he had forgotten every conversation happening around him the moment he saw her smile. Within a year, they were married. The wedding itself had been simple: a small church, a handful of relatives, homemade food prepared by neighbors, no expensive decorations, no famous guests. Yet everyone remembered how happy the couple appeared that afternoon. Thomas often told people that marrying Eleanor had been the greatest blessing of his life. He truly believed it. Over the following decade, he devoted nearly everything he earned to giving his wife a comfortable life. When business improved, he purchased a larger cottage. When Eleanor admired a beautiful piano displayed in a shop window, Thomas quietly saved money for nearly 18 months before surprising her one Christmas morning. When she mentioned wishing for a rose garden, he spent every Sunday afternoon planting one behind their home. Nothing seemed too difficult. Nothing seemed too expensive. If Eleanor smiled, Thomas believed every sacrifice had been worthwhile. The villagers noticed his devotion. Some admired it. Others quietly wondered whether he gave too much. Old Mrs. Holloway, who had lived in Ashcombe for more than 70 years, once remarked to another woman, "Thomas loves with his whole heart." She paused before adding softly, "I only hope his heart is never broken." At the time, no one paid much attention to her words. Why would they? Thomas and Eleanor appeared perfectly happy. Every Sunday they attended church together. Every evening they walked beside the river before supper. Every Christmas they invited lonely neighbors into their homes so no one would celebrate alone. To the outside world, they seemed like the very picture of a peaceful marriage. Thomas himself never imagined otherwise. He trusted Eleanor completely. If she asked for money, he gladly gave it. If she wished to redecorate the house, he encouraged her. When she suggested opening a small savings account in both of their names, Thomas agreed without hesitation. He often joked that everything he owned already belonged to her anyway. She would simply smile, sometimes warmly, sometimes thoughtfully. As the years passed, Thomas worked even harder. His furniture became popular beyond Ashcombe. Customers traveled from neighboring towns to place orders months in advance. For the first time in his life, Thomas began earning more money than he had ever imagined possible. Instead of spending it on himself, he continued planning for Eleanor's future. He invested in additional land, purchased government bonds, added more savings to the bank. Everything remained registered jointly in both their names. "It protects us both," he would say whenever friends asked why. Eleanor always thanked him, always smiled, always appeared grateful. Yet somewhere beneath those smiles, something had quietly begun to change. At first, almost no one noticed. She started spending more afternoons in the nearby town of Kingsbridge. She explained that she enjoyed browsing the larger shops. Thomas never questioned her. She occasionally returned wearing dresses more fashionable than anything sold locally. Thomas simply admired how beautiful she looked. He never asked how much they had cost. Sometimes she remained unusually quiet during supper. When Thomas asked whether anything was wrong, she would gently shake her head. "I'm only tired." He believed her every single time. Winter passed, then spring, then another summer. Life continued almost exactly as before, until a cool September afternoon. A polished black carriage rolled slowly into Ashcombe. The horses wore expensive leather harnesses. The driver sat dressed in a tailored coat unlike anything the villagers had ever seen. Children stopped playing to watch it pass. Shopkeepers stepped outside. Even the church caretaker paused his work. The carriage finally stopped outside the old Hawthorne Manor, a large house that had stood empty for several years. Word spread quickly. A wealthy businessman from London had purchased the property. His name was Edward Harrington. No one in Ashcombe realized the arrival of one stranger would begin changing the lives of Thomas Whitmore and Eleanor forever. The arrival of Edward Harrington became the most discussed event Ashcombe had witnessed in years. For nearly a week, villagers found small reasons to walk past Hawthorne Manor. Some admired the beautifully restored gardens. Others paused to watch servants unload polished furniture, expensive paintings, and wooden crates bearing shipping labels from London, Liverpool, and even Paris. Children whispered that the new owner must be richer than anyone in the county. Older villagers simply smiled. "Money always attracts attention," one farmer quietly remarked. Edward Harrington was 42 years old, tall, well-dressed, soft-spoken. Unlike many wealthy businessmen, he rarely raised his voice. He carried himself with calm confidence and possessed the polished manners of someone accustomed to moving among influential people. Within days, he had introduced himself to nearly every shopkeeper in Ashcombe. He purchased supplies from local businesses rather than sending servants to larger towns. He donated money to repair the church roof. He even sponsored the annual harvest festival. The villagers quickly formed a favorable opinion of him. Thomas Whitmore was among them. One afternoon, Edward entered Thomas's workshop carrying a detailed sketch. "I've heard you're the finest carpenter in the county." Thomas smiled modestly. "I do my best." Edward unfolded the drawing across the workbench. "I've recently purchased Hawthorne Manor. I'll need new furniture." Thomas studied the design carefully. A dining table, 8 matching chairs, 2 bookshelves, several cabinets. The commission would require months of work. It was also the largest order Thomas had ever received. "I'd be honored." Edward extended his hand. "Then we have an agreement." Thomas returned home that evening happier than he had been in years. The payment from the commission would allow him to finish renovating the cottage, perhaps even build the sunroom Eleanor had always wanted. When he shared the news during supper, Eleanor smiled politely. "That sounds wonderful." Thomas noticed she seemed distracted. "Is everything all right?" She looked up. "Of course. I'm simply tired." He nodded. Once again, he believed her. Over the following weeks, Thomas devoted nearly every waking hour to the Harrington Commission. He left home before sunrise, often returned long after sunset. The workshop remained filled with the steady rhythm of saws, chisels, and hammers. Each piece of furniture received the same careful attention that had earned Thomas his reputation. Meanwhile, Eleanor found herself spending more time in Kingsbridge. At least, that was what she told Thomas. Some afternoons she claimed to be shopping. Other days she visited dressmakers. Occasionally she mentioned afternoon tea with women from neighboring villages. Thomas never questioned her. He trusted her completely. One crisp October afternoon, Eleanor decided to visit Hawthorne Manor. Officially, she wished to thank Edward Harrington for bringing valuable business to her husband. At least, that was the reason she gave herself. Edward welcomed her warmly. The manor's grand drawing room overlooked rolling fields painted gold by the autumn sun. Fresh flowers filled crystal vases. Books lined polished shelves. Everything reflected quiet elegance rather than excessive luxury. They spoke only briefly, about Thomas's craftsmanship, about village life, about London. When Eleanor prepared to leave, Edward said something unexpected. "Your husband speaks of you often." She smiled. "Does he?" "He considers himself the luckiest man in England." For a brief moment, Eleanor lowered her eyes. No one had ever doubted Thomas's love, not even she. As the weeks passed, small meetings gradually became more frequent. Sometimes Edward visited the workshop. Sometimes Eleanor stopped by Hawthorne Manor under harmless excuses. None of the conversations seemed improper. They discussed books, music, travel, life beyond quiet village streets. Edward spoke of Paris, Vienna, Florence, places Eleanor had only read about. She listened with growing fascination. Thomas, meanwhile, remained completely unaware. Every evening he continued building furniture that would eventually fill Edward's beautiful manor. Occasionally he joked, "I hope Mr. Harrington enjoys these pieces as much as I have enjoyed making them." Eleanor simply smiled. Yet something inside her had begun changing. Ashcombe suddenly felt smaller than before. Its familiar streets no longer seemed charming. Its routines no longer felt comforting. She began imagining another kind of life, one filled with elegant parties, beautiful cities, expensive dresses, long journeys across Europe. Dreams that once seemed impossible slowly became imaginable. Edward never encouraged such thoughts directly. He rarely spoke about emotions. Instead, he asked simple questions. If you could live anywhere, where would you choose? If money no longer mattered, what would you do? Each question lingered long after their conversations ended. Back home, Thomas noticed only that Eleanor had become unusually quiet. One evening, he presented her with a small velvet box. Inside rested a delicate gold necklace. "I've been saving for months," he said shyly. "I thought you'd like it." Eleanor looked at the necklace. It was beautiful, handcrafted, simple. Exactly the sort of gift Thomas always chose. She hugged him warmly. "Thank you." And for a moment, she genuinely meant it. But later that night, while Thomas slept peacefully beside her, she quietly stared out the bedroom window toward the distant lights of Hawthorne Manor. Somewhere deep inside her heart, a dangerous question had begun to grow. What if love alone was no longer enough? The first snow of the season arrived earlier than expected. A thin white layer settled across the rooftops of Ashcombe, softening the narrow streets and covering the fields beyond the village. Smoke drifted lazily from stone chimneys as families gathered indoors to escape the cold. Inside his workshop, Thomas Whitmore continued shaping oak into the final pieces of furniture for Hawthorne Manor. His hands moved with their usual care. Every joint fit perfectly. Every surface was polished until it reflected the warm glow of the lantern hanging above his workbench. He smiled quietly to himself. Only a few more weeks remained before the commission would be finished. The payment would be enough to clear the last mortgage on their cottage. For the first time in years, Thomas believed he and Eleanor would finally live without financial worry. He imagined surprising her with the news on Christmas morning. He pictured the happiness on her face. That thought alone made the long hours worthwhile. Meanwhile, Eleanor found herself visiting Hawthorne Manor more often. At first, the visits remained short. She admired the furniture Thomas had built. She complimented the gardens. She accepted a cup of tea before returning home. No one thought much of it. Edward Harrington was becoming a respected member of the community. Many villagers visited the manor. Yet as autumn slowly faded into winter, something changed. Their conversations became longer, more personal. Edward listened carefully whenever Eleanor spoke. He remembered small details, her favorite flowers, the books she enjoyed reading, the dreams she had once held before marrying. Thomas had always loved her deeply. Edward seemed to understand her differently. One afternoon, they stood together beside the large windows overlooking the frozen gardens. "You've never left Ashcombe?" Edward asked. Eleanor shook her head. "No, not even for London. Only once when I was a child." Edward looked towards the distant hills. "There is an enormous world beyond this village," he spoke gently. "So many places waiting to be seen." His words lingered in Eleanor's thoughts long after she returned home. That evening, Thomas greeted her with cheerful excitement. "I've nearly finished the dining table. You should see it tomorrow." She forced a smile. "I'm sure it's beautiful." Thomas noticed her distant expression. "You seem tired again." "It's nothing." He accepted the answer without another question. That had always been Thomas's nature. He trusted the people he loved, completely. As Christmas approached, Ashcombe prepared for its annual winter celebration. The church square filled with lanterns. Children practiced carols, merchants decorated their windows with evergreen branches and ribbons. On the evening of the festival, nearly the entire village gathered together. Thomas proudly introduced Eleanor to customers who admired his craftsmanship. Edward Harrington also attended, well-dressed as always, friendly, confident. When Thomas stepped away to help another guest, Edward found himself standing beside Eleanor. "You seem unhappy tonight." She looked surprised. "Do I?" "You smile," he replied quietly, "but your eyes don't." For a long moment she said nothing. Then she whispered, "Have you ever felt like your life was meant to be something else?" Edward studied the falling snow before answering. "Every day." Neither of them noticed that an elderly woman standing nearby had quietly watched the brief conversation. Mrs. Holloway had lived long enough to recognize certain looks between people. She said nothing, but a feeling of unease settled in her heart. Over the following months, Eleanor began inventing small excuses to leave home. Sometimes she claimed she needed fabric. Other times she mentioned visiting a sick neighbor. Thomas never questioned her explanations. His own days were consumed by work. Orders continued arriving from nearby towns. His reputation had never been stronger. One rainy afternoon, Thomas visited the local bank. He had saved enough money to make another large deposit into the account he shared with Eleanor. The bank manager smiled warmly. "Your savings continue to grow, Mr. Whitmore." Thomas nodded proudly. "It's for our future. I want Eleanor to have security no matter what happens." The bank manager completed the paperwork. Thomas never noticed that Eleanor had quietly learned almost everything about their accounts over the previous year. She knew where the documents were kept. She knew the account numbers. She even knew which signatures the bank accepted. Not because Thomas had hidden anything, because he had hidden nothing. Trust had always been the foundation of their marriage. One evening, while Thomas worked late in his workshop, Eleanor sat alone in the cottage. A knock came at the door. She opened it. Edward stood outside under a dark umbrella. "I won't stay long," he said softly. "I only wanted to return the book you lent me." She invited him inside. Rain tapped gently against the windows as they talked beside the fire. Hours passed unnoticed. Before leaving, Edward paused near the doorway. "If you ever wished to leave Ashcombe," he said carefully, "you wouldn't have to go alone." Silence filled the room. Eleanor lowered her eyes. She didn't answer, but neither did she tell him to leave. Outside, the rain continued falling through the quiet village. And for the first time since their marriage began, a secret now existed between Thomas Whitmore and the woman he trusted more than anyone else in the world. The winter of 1888 settled gently over Ashcombe. Each morning a thin blanket of frost covered the fields, and the narrow village roads sparkled beneath the pale sunlight. Smoke curled from stone chimneys, while church bells echoed softly through the cold air. Life appeared peaceful. Thomas Whitmore believed it was the happiest season of his life. His commission for Hawthorne Manor had been completed with extraordinary success. Edward Harrington paid every penny exactly as promised. In fact, he paid a little more. "You've earned it," Edward said while shaking Thomas's hand. "I've never owned finer furniture." Thomas smiled with genuine gratitude. "Thank you, sir." The extra payment meant something important. That afternoon, Thomas walked directly to the bank. He deposited nearly every coin into the joint account he shared with Eleanor. The bank manager congratulated him. "You've built quite a respectable savings." Thomas nodded proudly. "It's all for our future." He meant every word. He imagined children running through the cottage one day, perhaps expanding the workshop, perhaps buying another piece of land nearby. Everything he dreamed about included Eleanor. Always Eleanor. That evening he returned home carrying fresh flowers. She smiled when she saw them. "They're beautiful." "They reminded me of you," Thomas replied. During supper, he spoke excitedly about renovating the kitchen during spring. "We'll finally have the home you've always wanted." Eleanor quietly stirred her tea. "You've done enough already." Thomas laughed. "I've only just begun." She forced a smile, but inside, her heart felt strangely divided. Over the past several months, her friendship with Edward Harrington had quietly become something neither of them could deny. They exchanged books, letters, conversations, then long walks through the woods outside Ashcombe. At first, they convinced themselves they were simply friends, nothing more. But every meeting lasted a little longer than the last. Every goodbye became slightly more difficult. One cloudy afternoon, they met beside the frozen river. No one else was nearby. Edward looked toward the flowing water before speaking. "I think about you constantly." Eleanor remained silent. "I've tried not to," he continued quietly. "I've told myself it's wrong, but every morning, you're still the first person I think about." The cold wind moved gently through the bare trees. Finally, Eleanor whispered, "So do I." Those 3 words changed everything. From that day forward, they no longer pretended their feelings did not exist, yet neither spoke openly about the future. Thomas remained between them, not as an enemy, but as a kind man who had done nothing wrong. That truth made everything more complicated. Edward never insulted Thomas. In fact, he admired him. "He's an honest man," Edward admitted one evening. "I know," Eleanor answered softly. "He deserves better than this." "Then why continue?" Edward asked. She looked away. "I don't know."
Weeks passed. The secret relationship grew deeper. Eleanor found herself inventing more excuses than ever before. Shopping trips, visits to distant relatives, charity meetings. Thomas believed every explanation without hesitation. Sometimes she felt guilty watching him smile as she left the house. He would kiss her forehead. "Be careful on the roads." "I always am," she replied. Then she walked away, carrying a secret heavier than any suitcase. One Saturday afternoon, Thomas surprised her with unexpected news. "I've spoken with the solicitor." Eleanor looked up. "About what?" "I've updated my will." She stared at him. "Why?" "I wanted everything to be simple if anything ever happened to me." He smiled warmly. "The cottage, the workshop, our savings, everything belongs to you." For several seconds, she couldn't speak. Thomas reached across the table and gently held her hand. "I don't need much in life, as long as I know you'll always be safe." A single tear formed in Eleanor's eye. Thomas misunderstood its meaning. He smiled. "I knew you'd worry, but now you don't have to." That night, long after Thomas had fallen asleep, Eleanor remained awake. She quietly walked downstairs, opened the cupboard beneath the staircase, and removed the small wooden box containing every important document Thomas owned. Property deeds, bank papers, insurance certificates. She carefully looked through each one. Then, just as carefully, she returned everything exactly where it had been. No one would have guessed she had touched a thing. The following afternoon, she met Edward once again. They walked along the cliffs overlooking the sea. Neither spoke for minutes. Finally, Edward broke the silence. "I've been offered a business opportunity in America." Eleanor stopped walking. "When?" "By summer. I'm expected to leave England." The words seemed to freeze the air around them. Edward continued quietly. "I don't want to go without you." She closed her eyes. Behind her stood the life she had always known. Ahead of her, a future she had never imagined possible. For the first time, the impossible suddenly felt like a decision, and deep within her heart, that decision had already begun to take shape.
Spring arrived early in 1888. The snow disappeared from the hills surrounding Ashcombe, and colorful wildflowers slowly returned to the fields. Birds filled the mornings with cheerful songs, while the scent of fresh earth drifted through the open windows of every cottage. To Thomas Whitmore, the world seemed full of promise. Business had never been better. New customers arrived almost every week. The workshop remained busy from sunrise until long after sunset. He often returned home exhausted, his hands sore from hours of carving wood, but he never complained. Every extra hour meant a better future for Eleanor. He had only one dream: to make sure she never had to worry about money for the rest of her life. One evening, as they shared supper by the fireplace, Thomas smiled warmly. "I've almost saved enough." Eleanor looked up. "For what?" Thomas's face brightened. "I've been thinking about buying the orchard beside our land." She looked surprised. "The old Carter orchard?" He nodded. "If we own that land too, we'll have enough space to build another workshop." He laughed softly. "And perhaps one day, our children can inherit everything." The room fell silent. Eleanor lowered her eyes. Thomas mistook her silence for happiness. He reached across the table and gently squeezed her hand. I know life hasn't always been easy, but I promise I'll spend the rest of my life making it better for you." She forced herself to smile. "You're a good man, Thomas. I simply love my wife," he answered without hesitation. Those words stayed with Eleanor long after the conversation ended. The following afternoon, Eleanor met Edward Harrington at Hawthorne Manor. The manor gardens had come alive with roses and climbing ivy. Everything looked peaceful, yet Eleanor's heart felt anything but peaceful. Edward noticed immediately. "What's wrong?" She remained quiet for several moments. "Thomas wants to build a future." Edward understood. "And you?" She slowly shook her head. "I don't know if that future still belongs to me." Edward looked toward the distant hills. "My ship leaves for America in 3 months. If I leave, this may be our last chance." The words settled heavily between them. Neither spoke for a long while. Finally, Eleanor whispered, "What kind of life could we have?" Edward answered honestly, "I've purchased land outside Boston. I intend to start a furniture importing business. There would be a new house, a new beginning. No one would know our past." For a brief moment, the future sounded almost magical. A new country, a new name, a new life. No whispers, no questions, no memories. But one obstacle remained: Thomas. That evening, Eleanor returned home later than usual. Thomas greeted her with his familiar smile. "I've made your favorite stew." She looked around the warm little cottage. The fire burned softly. Fresh bread rested on the table. A vase filled with flowers stood beside the window. Everything reflected the quiet love Thomas poured into their home every single day. As they ate together, Thomas spoke excitedly about their anniversary. "I've arranged something special." She looked at him. "What?" "I won't tell you," he laughed. "It's a surprise." She smiled politely, yet inside, her heart felt heavier than ever. Days passed. Edward became increasingly anxious. His departure drew closer. One rainy evening, he handed Eleanor a sealed envelope. "Don't open it until you're alone." She slipped it into her coat pocket. That night, after Thomas had fallen asleep, she quietly unfolded the letter by candlelight. Inside, Edward had written only a few paragraphs. "I cannot ask you to betray your conscience, but I cannot pretend I no longer love you. If you choose to come with me, I will spend the rest of my life proving you made the right decision. If you choose to stay, I will leave England without ever troubling you again. The choice is yours." At the bottom of the page, one final sentence: "The ship sails on July 18th. Eleanor folded the letter with trembling hands. For several nights she barely slept. She walked through the village wondering which life truly belonged to her: the quiet certainty of Thomas or the uncertain excitement offered by Edward. Then something unexpected happened. While Thomas worked late in his shop, Eleanor visited the bank to ask a simple question. The manager recognized her immediately. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Whitmore." She smiled politely. "I wanted to ask about our account." "Certainly." The manager explained that because the account was held jointly, either Thomas or Eleanor could legally withdraw the funds. No special permission was required. No additional signatures. Everything had been arranged that way years earlier, because Thomas had trusted her completely. Eleanor thanked the manager and quietly left the building. As she walked home beneath the fading evening sky, one thought refused to leave her mind. If she decided to leave England, she would not have to begin with nothing. She knew exactly where every pound Thomas had earned was kept, and for the first time, the terrible possibility of taking it all began to feel less like an impossible thought and more like a plan. The weeks that followed became some of the most difficult of Eleanor Whitmore's life. Every morning she woke beside Thomas and saw the same familiar kindness in his eyes. Every evening he returned home exhausted from work, carrying fresh bread, flowers, or small gifts he believed might make her smile. And every day the guilt inside her grew heavier. Yet despite the guilt, the dream refused to disappear. America, a new life, a fresh beginning. Edward Harrington spoke about it often. The bustling streets of Boston, the opportunities waiting there, the freedom of becoming someone entirely new. To Eleanor, who had spent nearly her entire life in Ashcombe, it sounded like another world. Meanwhile, Thomas continued working harder than ever. The orchard purchase had nearly been finalized. He had already spoken with surveyors, builders, solicitors. Everything was moving forward. One evening he returned home carrying a rolled piece of paper. His face glowed with excitement. "Eleanor, look!" He spread the drawing across the dining table. It was a detailed plan for expanding their property. A larger workshop, a greenhouse, a small guest cottage, and beside the garden, a future nursery. Thomas pointed proudly at each section. "We won't build everything immediately," he laughed softly, "but one day, this could all belong to our family." Eleanor stared at the drawing. Thomas had spent months planning every detail, not for himself, for her, for a future he believed they would share. A painful ache settled in her chest. For a brief moment, she considered telling him everything: the meetings, the letters, Edward, the ship, all of it. Perhaps the truth would hurt him less than betrayal. But when she looked into his hopeful eyes, the words refused to come. Instead, she smiled weakly. "It's beautiful." Thomas beamed with pride. That night he slept peacefully. Eleanor did not. Several days later, she met Edward in a secluded section of the woods outside the village. The summer air felt warm and still. Edward immediately noticed her troubled expression. "You haven't made a decision." She shook her head. "No. The ship leaves in 5 weeks." "I know." Edward stepped closer. "If you're staying, I'll respect it. But if you're coming, we need to prepare." Eleanor looked away. "What do you mean?" Edward hesitated, then spoke carefully. "Travel isn't cheap. We'll need funds." The word lingered in the air between them. Funds. Money. Neither mentioned Thomas directly. Neither needed to. Both understood. Eleanor already knew where the money was. Over the following weeks, she began quietly gathering information, not stealing, not yet, only observing. She reviewed account records, examined property documents, organized financial papers. Thomas noticed nothing unusual. He often thanked her for helping manage household affairs. "You always keep everything so organized," he said one evening. She nearly cried hearing those words. The trust he placed in her was absolute, and she was preparing to destroy it. July arrived. The village celebrated summer fairs and outdoor markets. Children played beside the river. Farmers prepared for harvest season. life continued as normal. Only Eleanor felt trapped between two futures. Then one afternoon, she received another letter from Edward. The message was brief. Tickets have been secured. July 18th, Liverpool Harbour. After that, there can be no second chance. Eleanor read the letter 3 times, then folded it carefully. The decision she had avoided for months could no longer be postponed. That evening, Thomas surprised her once again. After supper, he handed her a small wooden box. "What is it?" she asked. "Open it." Inside rested a beautiful gold pocket watch attached to a delicate chain. Eleanor looked confused. Thomas smiled. "I sold one of my older workshop tools. You've always admired watches." The gift wasn't extravagant, but she knew how much it had cost him. Thomas rarely spent money on himself. Every spare pound usually went into savings. Yet he willingly sacrificed something he valued simply to make her happy. Her eyes filled with tears. Thomas immediately looked concerned. "Do you not like it?" "No," she whispered. "I love it." And for the first time in many months, that answer was completely honest. Later that night, after Thomas had gone to bed, Eleanor remained downstairs alone. The house sat in complete silence. Moonlight filtered through the windows. The wooden box containing their financial documents rested beneath the staircase. For several minutes she stared at it, then slowly walked toward it. Her hands trembled as she opened the lid. Property deeds, bank certificates, savings records, investment papers, everything Thomas had spent years building, everything he trusted her to protect. She carefully removed the documents and placed them on the table. The reality of what she was considering suddenly felt frighteningly real. This wasn't simply leaving. This wasn't merely following another man. This would destroy the life Thomas had spent over a decade creating. A decent woman would have stopped right there. A decent woman would have returned the papers and forgotten the entire plan. But Eleanor's thoughts had already traveled too far. The dream of escape had grown stronger than her conscience. Outside, the church clock struck midnight. The sound echoed softly across the sleeping village. Eleanor looked at the documents one final time. Then she reached for a blank sheet of paper and began writing a list of everything she would need to take when she left.
The first week of July passed with unusual calm. To everyone in Ashcombe, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Thomas Whitmore continued building furniture in his workshop. Edward Harrington appeared busy preparing for his return to London before sailing to America. Eleanor carried on with her daily routines as though nothing had changed. Only she knew that every ordinary day brought her one step closer to leaving forever. The list she had written continued to grow. Bank documents, property deeds, savings certificates, jewelry, cash hidden inside the kitchen cupboard, Thomas's account book, their marriage certificate, anything that might be useful in a new country. She folded the list carefully and hid it inside the lining of her travel bag. Each evening, she crossed another item from the page. Thomas noticed none of it. He had never searched through Eleanor's belongings, never questioned where she went, never counted the money in the house. Trust had always been the foundation of their marriage. One rainy afternoon, Thomas arrived home carrying a small wooden sign.
Beautiful letters had been carved across its surface. Whitmore and family. Eleanor looked at it curiously. Thomas smiled like an excited child. I thought we'd place it above the front door after the renovations. She traced the carved letters with her fingers. It's beautiful. I made it after work, he replied proudly. I hope one day our children will see it every morning. His words felt like tiny knives against her conscience. She forced another smile. I think they'll love it. Thomas leaned over and kissed her forehead. I love you, Eleanor. She closed her eyes. I know. That night she could barely sleep. Every promise Thomas made seemed to echo through the silent cottage. Every dream he shared depended upon a future she no longer intended to be a part of. 3 days later, she met Edward in an abandoned mill outside the village. The old building stood empty beside a slow-moving stream. Broken windows allowed soft afternoon light to spill across the dusty floor. Edward spread several documents across an old table. There are tickets, he pointed toward the 2 folded papers. The train leaves Ashcombe in the morning of July 17th. We'll spend 1 night in Liverpool. The ship sails the following afternoon. Eleanor stared silently at the tickets. Everything suddenly felt real. There will be no turning back, Edward said quietly. She nodded. I understand. He hesitated before asking the question that had remained unspoken for weeks. What about the money? The room became completely silent. Eleanor lowered her eyes. I know how to access everything. Edward looked uncomfortable. You don't have to take all of it. She answered almost immediately. If I leave him with the money, he'll spend years searching for me. If I take everything, he'll have nothing keeping him here. Edward looked at her with surprise. For the first time, even he seemed uncertain. That's a harsh decision. Eleanor stared toward the broken window. So is leaving. Neither spoke again for several minutes. Back in Ashcombe, Thomas was making his own plans. He visited the jeweler and purchased a new wedding band, not because the old one had been lost, but because Eleanor had once mentioned that she liked a slightly different design. Thomas smiled as he placed the small velvet box inside his coat pocket. He couldn't wait to surprise her on their anniversary. On his walk home, he met Mrs. Holloway sitting outside her cottage. The elderly woman smiled warmly. You've been working too hard again. Thomas laughed. I don't mind. It's for Eleanor. Mrs. Holloway studied his face for a long moment. You love her very much. More than my own life, Thomas answered without hesitation. The old woman looked toward the road leading out of the village, then quietly said, Sometimes we love people so completely that we stop noticing when they're slowly walking away. Thomas frowned gently. I'm afraid I don't understand. Mrs. Holloway smiled. I hope you never have to. Thomas continued home, never realizing that her words carried a warning. Meanwhile, Eleanor prepared for the final step of her plan. The joint bank account required only one signature, her own. Thomas had arranged that way years earlier because he believed husband and wife should trust each other equally. He remembered the day he had signed the papers. He had smiled proudly. No matter what happens, everything I have belongs to you. She whispered those same words to herself now. Everything I have belongs to you. The memory almost made her abandon the entire plan. Almost. But then she imagined the crowded streets of Boston, a large house overlooking the harbor, elegant dresses, music, travel, a life completely different from the quiet existence she had always known. The dream won once again. 2 mornings later, Thomas left before sunrise to complete a large furniture delivery in a neighboring town. He would not return until evening. Before leaving, he kissed Eleanor gently. "I'll be back before supper." "I'll be waiting," she replied softly. As soon as his wagon disappeared beyond the hill, the smile vanished from her face. She walked upstairs, opened the wardrobe, removed the travel bag hidden beneath several blankets. Then she quietly took out the folded list she had written days earlier. One by one, she began placing Thomas Whitmore's entire future into that single bag.
The morning of July 16th, 1888, began like every other morning in Ashcombe. A cool breeze drifted through the open windows of the Whitmore cottage. The church bell rang 6 times. Birds sang from the old oak trees behind the workshop. Thomas finished his breakfast with his usual smile. He looked across the table at Eleanor. "I'll be in Kingsbridge most of the day." She nodded quietly. "There are still papers to sign for the orchard." Thomas folded his napkin. "If everything goes well, by next week it'll officially belong to us." He reached across the table and gently held her hand. "Our future is finally coming together." Eleanor could barely meet his eyes. She simply whispered, "I'm happy for you." Thomas smiled. "For us," he corrected softly. "For us." Those would become the last hopeful words he ever spoke inside that house. Before leaving, he walked through every room as he always did. He checked the fire, locked the workshop, fed the chickens, then returned once more to kiss Eleanor goodbye. "I'll see you this evening." She forced one final smile. "I'll be here." Thomas climbed into his wagon and disappeared down the quiet village road. Eleanor stood in the doorway until he was completely out of sight. Only then did she slowly close the door. The cottage fell silent. For several minutes she stood perfectly still. Her breathing became heavier. There was still time to stop. She could unpack the travel bag, burn Edward's letters, forget everything. When Thomas returned that evening, life could continue exactly as before. But instead, she walked toward the cupboard beneath the staircase. She removed the wooden box containing every important document. Then she climbed upstairs and packed with frightening precision. Property deeds, savings certificates, government bonds, insurance papers, marriage documents, Thomas's account books, every valuable piece of jewelry, even the anniversary ring Thomas had secretly purchased for her only days earlier. She hesitated for a single moment while holding the small velvet box. Then she placed it inside the suitcase as well. Nothing would be left behind. Shortly before noon, Eleanor arrived at Ashcombe Bank. The manager greeted her warmly. "Mrs. Whitmore, what can I do for you today?" She smiled calmly. "I need to withdraw the funds from our joint account." "Certainly." The manager never questioned the request. The paperwork was perfectly legal. Thomas himself had arranged it years earlier. Within an hour, nearly every pound Thomas had earned during 12 years of marriage was converted into bank drafts and cash. The manager carefully counted the money before placing it inside a secure leather satchel. "I hope you and Mr. Whitmore enjoy whatever you're planning." Eleanor forced another smile. "I'm sure we will." She walked out of the bank carrying almost everything Thomas owned. No one stopped her. No one suspected a thing. That afternoon, she hired a carriage to Kingsbridge. Edward Harrington was already waiting. When he saw the heavy satchel, his expression changed. "You actually did it?" She nodded slowly. "I told you I would." Edward remained silent. For the first time since they had met, he looked genuinely uneasy. "Eleanor, are you certain?" She looked straight ahead. "If I turn back now, I'll lose both lives." Edward understood. Without another word, he placed their luggage inside the carriage. The horses began moving toward the station. Miles away, Thomas completed the final paperwork for the orchard. He couldn't stop smiling. He imagined Eleanor's excitement when he told her. On his way home, he stopped at the bakery and bought her favorite sweet rolls. He also purchased fresh flowers, white roses, her favorite. As evening approached, his wagon rolled slowly back into Ashcombe. Children waved as he passed. Neighbors greeted him warmly. Thomas smiled at everyone. He had no idea his world had already collapsed. He reached the cottage just before sunset. Something felt strange immediately. The front door stood slightly open. Eleanor never left it unlocked. Thomas stepped inside. "Eleanor?" No answer. He placed the flowers on the table. "Eleanor?" Silence. The sitting room looked almost normal, but the hallway cupboard stood open. He hurried upstairs. The wardrobe doors hung wide apart. Several shelves were empty. Her dresses were gone. Her traveling trunk had disappeared. A cold feeling spread through his chest. "No," he whispered. He ran downstairs. The wooden document box lay open, completely empty. His hands began to shake. He ran to the bedroom, looked under the bed, opened every drawer. Nothing. Then, he noticed a single folded envelope resting on the table. His name appeared on the front. Thomas. His fingers trembled as he slowly broke the seal. The first line stole the air from his lungs.
Thomas stood motionless beside the dining table. The folded letter trembled in his hands. For several long moments, he simply stared at the first sentence, unable to continue. Outside, the evening sun slipped slowly below the hills. Inside the cottage, only silence remained. Finally, Thomas took a slow breath and forced himself to read. "Thomas, if you are reading this, I have already left Ashcombe. I know what I have done will hurt you more than anything I could ever say, and for that I am truly sorry." His eyes blurred. He wiped them quickly and continued. "Please do not search for me. I no longer belong here. I have chosen another life and another future." Thomas felt his knees weaken. He leaned against the table to keep himself from falling. The next sentence hurt even more. "By the time you discover this, I will be too far away for you to bring me back." There was no explanation, no argument, no promise to return, only a farewell. Thomas read the final lines over and over again. "One day, I hope you forgive me. Goodbye." There was no signature. She had not even written her own name. The letter slipped from his fingers and drifted onto the wooden floor. For a long time, Thomas did not move. The flowers he had bought for Eleanor still rested on the table. The sweet rolls from the bakery remained wrapped in paper. Everything he had carried home with excitement suddenly felt meaningless. As darkness settled outside, a neighbor noticed that the cottage remained unusually quiet. Mrs. Holloway knocked gently on the front door. "Thomas?" No answer. She pushed the door open.
Thomas was still standing exactly where he had been, staring at nothing. The old woman immediately understood. She quietly picked up the letter from the floor. After reading only a few lines, she placed it back on the table. Without saying a word, she made him a cup of tea. Thomas never touched it. Later that evening, word spread through Ashcombe. By morning, the entire village knew Eleanor Whitmore had disappeared. Some people whispered, others expressed sympathy. A few simply shook their heads in disbelief. No one had expected such a thing. The following morning, Thomas walked to the bank. He still hoped there had been some terrible mistake. The bank manager greeted him politely. "Good morning, Mr. Whitmore." Thomas tried to smile. "I need to check our account." The manager opened the ledger. His expression slowly changed. "I'm terribly sorry." Thomas felt his heart sink. The account was emptied yesterday. Every pound, every investment, every savings certificate, gone. Thomas stood in complete silence. "The withdrawal was legal," the manager added quietly. "It was a joint account. You authorized that arrangement years ago." Thomas nodded slowly. "I remember." He remembered everything. He remembered telling Eleanor, "Everything I have belongs to you." The words echoed painfully inside his mind. He thanked the manager politely before walking outside. He did not blame him. The bank had done nothing wrong. He himself had signed every document. The fault, at least in his own mind, was his. By afternoon, he visited the solicitor. Perhaps the property deeds remained safe. Perhaps something had been overlooked. The solicitor searched through the records, then looked up with visible regret. The deeds were collected yesterday. Thomas closed his eyes. And the bonds? Transferred. The insurance papers? Also taken. There was almost nothing left. The cottage still stood. The workshop still stood. But nearly every document proving his ownership had disappeared. Recovering everything would take months, perhaps years. When Thomas returned home that evening, the house felt larger than ever before, not because it had changed, but because it had become empty. He walked slowly into the bedroom. Her side of the wardrobe remained bare. The piano she once loved stood untouched. The rose garden outside the window bloomed beautifully, even though the person he had planted it for was gone. He sat quietly in the chair beside the fireplace. Without realizing it, he looked toward the front door every few minutes. A small part of him still expected Eleanor to walk back inside, smiling, apologizing, saying it had all been a terrible misunderstanding. But the hours passed, then the night. No footsteps came, no knock sounded at the door. Only the ticking of the old clock filled the room. For the first time in 12 years, Thomas Whitmore spent an entire night completely alone. And far away, aboard a northbound train heading toward Liverpool, Eleanor sat beside Edward Harrington. The countryside rushed past the window. Ashcombe disappeared into the distance. She never looked back. The morning after Eleanor's disappearance, Ashcombe no longer felt like the village Thomas Whitmore had known for most of his life. People still greeted one another in the streets. The church bell still rang every hour. The bakery still opened before sunrise. Life continued, but whenever Thomas walked past, conversations quietly stopped. Some villagers lowered their eyes out of sympathy. Others watched him with silent sadness. No one knew what to say. Thomas himself spoke very little. He rose before dawn out of habit. He lit the lantern inside his workshop. He picked up his tools. He tried to work, but after only a few minutes, he realized he had been staring at the same unfinished table without moving. For the first time in nearly 20 years, he could not bring himself to carve a single piece of wood. His hands simply refused. Late that morning, there was another knock at the door. It was the solicitor. His face looked unusually serious. "May I come in?" Thomas nodded. The two men sat quietly at the dining table, where Eleanor's farewell letter still rested. The solicitor unfolded several papers. "I've spent the morning reviewing your financial records." Thomas looked hopefully. "Can anything be recovered?" The solicitor hesitated. "Some of it may be challenged, but it will take years." Thomas lowered his head. "And until then?" The older man sighed. "You still owe money on several business loans." Thomas frowned. "I thought those had nearly been paid." "They had, but the final payments were due from your savings account." Thomas suddenly understood. The account no longer existed. The money was gone. Without it, the debts remained. The solicitor continued gently. "If payments stop, creditors may claim part of your workshop." The words struck harder than Thomas expected. The workshop was not simply a building. It was his father's workshop. His grandfather had worked there before him. Nearly every happy memory of his life existed within those wooden walls. After the solicitor left, Thomas walked slowly across the yard. He unlocked the workshop door. Sunlight filtered through the dusty windows. Every tool remained exactly where he had left it. The smell of fresh oak still filled the room. He rested one hand upon his father's old workbench. "I don't know what to do," he whispered into the empty room. No answer came, only silence. That evening, Mrs. Holloway arrived carrying a basket of homemade soup and bread. "You haven't eaten," she said softly. "I'm not hungry," Thomas replied. She placed the basket on the table anyway. "You still need strength." He looked toward the fireplace. "I keep asking myself, what did I do wrong?" Mrs. Holloway answered almost immediately. "Not every broken heart is caused by a mistake." Thomas looked at her. "I loved her. I know. I trusted her. I know. I gave her everything." The old woman gently nodded. "I know." Tears slowly filled Thomas's eyes. "I still don't understand." Mrs. Holloway reached across the table and quietly rested her hand upon his. "Sometimes the kindest people blame themselves for choices they never made." For the first time since Eleanor left, Thomas cried. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly, like a man whose entire future had disappeared overnight. Days turned into weeks. Business began to suffer. Customers noticed unfinished orders. Thomas worked slower than ever before. His concentration disappeared. Simple measurements became difficult. Small mistakes appeared in work that had once been flawless. Some customers remained patient. Others quietly hired different craftsmen. Money became even scarcer. Then came another letter. One afternoon, the village postmaster knocked on Thomas's door. This arrived from Liverpool. Thomas stared at the unfamiliar handwriting. For a brief moment, his heart raced. Could it be Eleanor? With trembling hands, he opened the envelope. Inside was only a single sheet of paper. Mr. Whitmore, the passengers Edward Harrington and Mrs. Eleanor Whitmore boarded the RMS Caledonia on July 18th. The ship departed safely for Boston. This notice is sent only because local authorities requested confirmation of departure. Thomas read the words again and again. There could no longer be any doubt. She had not been kidnapped. She had not become lost. She had chosen to leave. She had crossed the ocean willingly. Thomas folded the letter carefully, then placed it beside the farewell note. 2 pieces of paper. Together they weighed almost nothing, yet together they carried the weight of his entire broken life. That evening, after the village had fallen asleep, Thomas walked alone to the small hill overlooking Ashcombe. From there he could see the lights shining inside dozens of homes. Families gathered for supper, children laughing, fathers returning from work. Everything looked peaceful. He quietly wondered whether Eleanor had ever looked at those same lights and dreamed of leaving them forever. The wind carried the distant sound of church bells across the valley. Thomas closed his eyes. For the first time, he accepted a painful truth. The woman he had spent 12 years loving was never coming home.
Summer slowly faded into autumn. The golden fields surrounding Ashcombe were harvested one final time before the cold winds returned from the sea. Leaves covered the village roads, and the evenings grew shorter with every passing week. Nearly 4 months had passed since Eleanor disappeared. To the people of Ashcombe, the story had become old news. They spoke about it less often now. New families arrived. Children were born. Harvest festivals came and went. Life continued. But for Thomas Whitmore, time seemed to have stopped on the day he found that letter. Every morning he still woke before sunrise. Every evening he still returned to an empty house. Nothing inside the cottage had changed. Eleanor's favorite chair remained beside the fireplace. The piano still stood near the window. Even the rose garden continued blooming exactly as it had before she left. Thomas could never bring himself to remove any of it. It felt as though changing the house would somehow erase the life they had once shared. Financially, things became much worse. Without the missing savings, Thomas struggled to keep up with his debts. The orchard purchase had been canceled. Several suppliers demanded payment. The local bank gave him additional time, but even the manager quietly admitted there was only so much he could do. One afternoon, Thomas made a decision he never imagined he would have to make. He carried several of his father's antique woodworking tools into the marketplace. Those tools had belonged to 3 generations of Whitmore craftsmen. His grandfather had carved furniture with them. His father had taught him to use them. Selling them felt like selling part of his family's history. Yet he had little choice. A collector purchased the set before sunset. Thomas accepted the money without saying a word. As he walked home carrying the empty wooden toolbox, he felt more alone than ever before. Mrs. Holloway saw him from across the road. She quietly crossed the street. "You sold them, didn't you?" Thomas nodded. "I had to." The old woman looked at the empty toolbox. "Your father loved those tools." "So did I," Thomas whispered. "But memories don't pay debts." That evening, the village pastor visited the cottage. He found Thomas sitting beside the cold fireplace, staring at the wedding photograph hanging on the wall. The pastor gently took a seat across from him. "I haven't seen you at church." Thomas managed a tired smile. "I've been busy." The pastor looked around the quiet room. "No," he answered kindly. "You've been hurting." For a long moment, neither man spoke. Finally, Thomas broke the silence. "I still pray for her." The pastor was surprised. "You pray for Eleanor?" Thomas nodded. "I don't pray that she comes back. I know she won't. I only pray that wherever she is, she finds the happiness she believed she couldn't find with me." The pastor felt his eyes fill with tears. Few people possessed such compassion after such betrayal. "You have a remarkable heart, Thomas." Thomas slowly shook his head. "No, I just don't know how to hate someone I spent half my life loving." Meanwhile, thousands of miles away, Boston welcomed another beautiful autumn. Edward Harrington's new business had begun successfully. He rented a large townhouse overlooking the harbor. Elegant furniture filled every room. Fine paintings decorated the walls. Expensive chandeliers illuminated the grand dining hall. Everything Eleanor had once dreamed about surrounded her. Beautiful dresses, luxury, servants, carriages, comfort. Yet, strangely, she found very little peace. At first, she blamed the unfamiliar city, then the long journey, then the cold weather. But as the weeks passed, she slowly realized the emptiness came from somewhere much deeper. Late one evening, she opened a small wooden chest containing the belongings she had brought from England. Inside lay the gold pocket watch Thomas had given her, the anniversary ring she had taken, their wedding photograph, and one pressed white rose that somehow survived the voyage across the Atlantic. She stared at the photograph for a long time. Thomas was smiling, the same gentle smile he had worn almost every day of their marriage. She quietly remembered the countless mornings he rose before dawn to provide for them, the evenings he returned home carrying flowers, the dreams he had shared, the sacrifices he had made. For the first time since leaving Ashcombe, Eleanor began to wonder whether she had mistaken comfort for happiness. Outside the window, Boston bustled with wealth and opportunity. Inside her heart, silence had begun to replace excitement. And for the first time, she realized that escaping a place did not always mean escaping the consequences made there.
The winter of 1889 arrived with heavy snow across both England and the eastern coast of America. Nearly a full year had passed since Eleanor had left Ashcombe. To Thomas Whitmore, each season seemed to carry the same quiet ache. The village had slowly accepted that Eleanor would never return. People stopped asking questions. No one spoke her name unless Thomas mentioned it first. Yet every morning before opening his workshop, Thomas still glanced toward the road leading into the village. Not because he believed she would come back, but because old habits are difficult to forget. His business had become much smaller. He could no longer afford assistance. Many expensive tools had been sold to pay his debts. The large expansion he once dreamed about had been abandoned completely. The orchard now belonged to another family. Even so, Thomas continued working. One chair, one table, one cabinet at a time. His furniture remained beautifully crafted, though his hands moved more slowly than before.
One snowy afternoon, a young widow entered his workshop carrying a broken rocking chair. "My husband made this," she said softly. "It means more to me than anything else." Thomas examined the chair carefully. "The wood is old, but I can repair it." The woman smiled with relief. "How much will it cost?" Thomas looked at her worn coat and tired eyes, then gently pushed the chair toward his workbench. "Nothing." She looked surprised. "I insist on paying." Thomas smiled. "Someone once taught me that kindness should never carry a price." The widow thanked him with tears in her eyes. Word of Thomas's generosity slowly spread beyond Ashcombe. People began traveling from neighboring villages once again, not only because he built excellent furniture, but because everyone said he was a man of uncommon honesty. Slowly, very slowly, his workshop began to recover. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, life inside Edward Harrington's beautiful townhouse had changed. The excitement that had once filled the house slowly disappeared. Edward spent more and more time away on business. Days often passed without the two sharing a proper conversation. When he did return home, he seemed tired, distracted, sometimes impatient. One evening, Eleanor prepared a special supper, hoping they might spend time together. Edward barely touched the meal. "I leave for New York tomorrow," he said while reviewing business papers. "You've only just returned," Eleanor replied quietly. "It's important," he answered without looking up. She watched him for several moments, then softly asked, "Do you remember when we used to talk for hours?" Edward finally raised his eyes. "That was before." "Before what?" "Before life became real." His answer lingered in the silence. Eleanor suddenly understood something she had never considered. Back in England, their relationship had existed only in secret moments. Quiet walks, letters, dreams. Now those dreams had become ordinary life, and ordinary life looked very different. Weeks later, Eleanor wandered alone through Boston Harbor. Ships arrived from every corner of the world. Merchants shouted across crowded docks. Street musicians performed for passing travelers. Everything was exactly as she had once imagined. Yet she felt strangely alone among thousands of people. She stopped outside a bookstore. In the window sat a beautifully carved wooden rocking chair. Its craftsmanship reminded her immediately of Thomas. She stood there for several minutes. Without realizing it, tears began sliding down her face. The shopkeeper noticed. "Are you all right, madam?" She quickly wiped her eyes. "Yes," she whispered. "I was only remembering someone." That evening she returned home and unlocked the small wooden chest she had carried from England. Inside remained the wedding photograph, Thomas's pocket watch, the pressed white rose, and one more item she had never dared to read again, his last anniversary letter. She unfolded it carefully. The paper had become worn from time. Thomas's handwriting remained neat as ever. "My dearest Eleanor, every day I thank God for bringing you into my life. Everything I build is for us. Everything I earn belongs to our future. As long as we're together,
I know I'll always be the richest man in England." Eleanor could read no further. She closed her eyes. For the first time since leaving, she cried without trying to stop herself. Not because she missed England, not because she regretted America, but because she finally understood the full weight of what she had destroyed. Far away in Ashcombe, at almost that exact moment, Thomas quietly placed another log onto the fire inside his cottage. He looked toward the empty chair beside him, then smiled sadly. "I hope you're warm tonight," he whispered into the silence. He still wasn't speaking out of anger. He wasn't wishing for revenge. Even after everything, he simply hoped the woman who had broken his heart was safe.
Spring arrived early in 1888. The snow disappeared from the hills surrounding Ashcombe, and colorful wildflowers slowly returned to the fields. Birds filled the mornings with cheerful songs, while the scent of fresh earth drifted through the open windows of every cottage. To Thomas Whitmore, the world seemed full of promise. Business had never been better. New customers arrived almost every week. The workshop remained busy from sunrise until long after sunset. He often returned home exhausted, his hands sore from hours of carving wood, but he never complained. Every extra hour meant a better future for Eleanor. He had only one dream: to make sure she never had to worry about money for the rest of her life. One evening, as they shared supper by the fireplace, Thomas smiled warmly. "I've almost saved enough." Eleanor looked up. "For what?" Thomas's face brightened. "I've been thinking about buying the orchard beside our land." She looked surprised. "The old Carter orchard?" He nodded. "If we own that land too, we'll have enough space to build another workshop." He laughed softly. "And perhaps one day, our children can inherit everything." The room fell silent. Eleanor lowered her eyes. Thomas mistook her silence for happiness. He reached across the table and gently squeezed her hand. "I know life hasn't always been easy, but I promise I'll spend the rest of my life making it better for you." She forced herself to smile. "You're a good man, Thomas." "I simply love my wife," he answered without hesitation. Those words stayed with Eleanor long after the conversation ended. The following afternoon, Eleanor met Edward Harrington at Hawthorne Manor. The manor gardens had come alive with roses and climbing ivy. Everything looked peaceful, yet Eleanor's heart felt anything but peaceful. Edward noticed immediately. "What's wrong?" She remained quiet for several moments. "Thomas wants to build a future." Edward understood. "And you?" She slowly shook her head. "I don't know if that future still belongs to me." Edward looked toward the distant hills. "My ship leaves for America in 3 months. If I leave, this may be our last chance." The words settled heavily between them. Neither spoke for a long while. Finally, Eleanor whispered, "What kind of life could we have?" Edward answered honestly, "I've purchased land outside Boston. I intend to start a furniture importing business. There would be a new house, a new beginning. No one would know our past." For a brief moment, the future sounded almost magical. A new country, a new name, a new life. No whispers, no questions, no memories. But one obstacle remained: Thomas. That evening, Eleanor returned home later than usual. Thomas greeted her with his familiar smile. "I've made your favorite stew." She looked around the warm little cottage. The fire burned softly. Fresh bread rested on the table. A vase filled with flowers stood beside the window. Everything reflected the quiet love Thomas poured into their home every single day. As they ate together, Thomas spoke excitedly about their anniversary. "I've arranged something special." She looked at him. "What?" "I won't tell you," he laughed. "It's a surprise." She smiled politely, yet inside, her heart felt heavier than ever. Days passed. Edward became increasingly anxious. His departure drew closer. One rainy evening, he handed Eleanor a sealed envelope. "Don't open it until you're alone." She slipped it into her coat pocket. That night, after Thomas had fallen asleep, she quietly unfolded the letter by candlelight. Inside, Edward had written only a few paragraphs. "I cannot ask you to betray your conscience, but I cannot pretend I no longer love you. If you choose to come with me, I will spend the rest of my life proving you made the right decision. If you choose to stay, I will leave England without ever troubling you again. The choice is yours." At the bottom of the page, one final sentence: "The ship sails on July 18th. Eleanor folded the letter with trembling hands. For several nights she barely slept. She walked through the village wondering which life truly belonged to her: the quiet certainty of Thomas or the uncertain excitement offered by Edward. Then something unexpected happened. While Thomas worked late in his shop, Eleanor visited the bank to ask a simple question. The manager recognized her immediately. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Whitmore." She smiled politely. "I wanted to ask about our account." "Certainly." The manager explained that because the account was held jointly, either Thomas or Eleanor could legally withdraw the funds. No special permission was required, no additional signatures. Everything had been arranged that way years earlier, because Thomas had trusted her completely. Eleanor thanked the manager and quietly left the building. As she walked home beneath the fading evening sky, one thought refused to leave her mind. If she decided to leave England, she would not have to begin with nothing. She knew exactly where every pound Thomas had earned was kept, and for the first time, the terrible possibility of taking it all began to feel less like an impossible thought and more like a plan.
The candle burned quietly beside Thomas Whitmore as he stared at the blank sheet of paper. For nearly an hour, he wrote nothing. Outside, the village of Ashcombe slept peacefully beneath the spring moon. Inside the small cottage, only the gentle ticking of the old clock broke the silence. At last, Thomas dipped his pen into the ink and began writing. "Dear Eleanor, your letter reached me safely. I have read it many times. Not because I wished to reopen old wounds, but because I wanted to understand the woman who wrote it." He paused. The memories returned one by one. The harvest festival where they first met, their wedding day, the tiny cottage they had built together, the rose garden, the evenings beside the fire, the dreams they had shared. Then came the day she left, the empty wardrobe, the missing savings, the letter on the table. He closed his eyes for a moment before continuing. "For many years,
I asked myself why you left. I searched for mistakes that perhaps I had made. Eventually, I learned something important. Not every loss is caused by our own failure. Sometimes people simply choose a different path, even when they are deeply loved. Thomas placed the pen down and looked around the quiet house.